Hey everyone. Recently, the Supreme Court passed a judgment allowing states to tax businesses that don't exist in their state. This is particularly important to online businesses that obviously have customers in all sorts of different states, counties, cities, countries. Basically, a lot of different tax jurisdictions. So now, potentially, I think this ruling leaves it up to the states as to how much or the terms with which they will tax businesses that do not exist in their state. And so the reasoning goes that these states are losing out a lot of money because their citizens are purchasing goods and services from a different location. And so that's a pretty weak foundation to build an argument on, right? It's hurting this or that state's pocketbooks. Therefore, they have the moral right and authority to tax people that are not in their jurisdiction. And so what does that sound like? That sounds a lot like taxation without representation, which I'm pretty sure most Americans learned about in history class in elementary school. And that was enough, or that and some other things was enough to to instigate the United States from breaking off of Britain. I suppose it wasn't called the United States at the time. I guess the colonies. And so it's pretty silly, right? There's these states, and they feel like they're getting left behind, and so now they're going to reach outside of their jurisdictions to extract money from people that can't even participate in the political process in their state. Part of the argument as well is that these brick and mortar stores inside of the various states are having more trouble selling their goods and services because on some levels they have to sell for a little bit higher prices because they are subject to all of the taxes in the local jurisdiction. And so that's I think that's just a kind of a continuation of the previous argument I just kind of debunked. I mean, just because some people are missing out because they are not, because somebody's built a better mousetrap or a better way to sell the mousetrap, doesn't mean that, the state should have the authority to steal more money from people. So what are some things that states could do to mitigate this kind of stuff, right? So they could balance their budgets if they're really losing a lot of money, which that's the wrong word. They're not losing money. If their incomes from all their plundering is being reduced, well then maybe they should improve the quality of their states. Maybe they should balance their budgets. Maybe they should spend less money. Maybe they should make it more appealing for online realtors, or not realtors, online retailers to locate in their state. And then all the money all the goods and services that they sell, they get, they'll be able to tax them for it, in a more legitimate fashion. For me, the baseline is taxation is theft. So if we can just, and we're not going to get there, I know that for sure, but if we can at least reduce it, that would be great, and at least play by like consistent rules, by even the rules and philosophies of people who believe in a government. If we can at least play by a consistent set of rules that you guys believe in, that would be great. But what else? So the state can reduce its budget. It can try to court different retailers into their states, or they could even make it much easier for existing, you know, stores and producers and all sorts of stuff in their state to operate online. You know, I imagine everybody's heard the statement, you know, you catch more flies with honey. Just take that approach. I mean, and it's not only like the more effective approach, it's the more moral approach. That approach is more predicated on mutual cooperation, voluntary interaction, mutual benefit. If you take that approach, it's moral, it's effective, and it'll work in the long run. Trying to reach out and steal money from businesses in different states obviously violates all sorts of rights. There are ways for them to skirt around these things. There's kind of a symmetry of complexity here as well. So you have all these online businesses, right? And it's going to be hell on earth for them to track every tax jurisdiction that they're selling into. And I think in the United States, you know, between states and counties and other, you know, imaginary lines that pull money out of people, there's what, like 10 or 12,000 I've seen estimates of. And so that'll be insane. Obviously, some of this will be automated by, you know, applications and programs and stuff, but that stuff's not free. It's just added cost for everybody. And, you know, and what does that in the long run hurt? It just hurts small businesses. It's the big businesses that make a lot of money already, that have already taken advantage of the state of the market, that will be able to afford, you know, tracking all of these things. And it'll be much more difficult for new businesses to come in, and for competition, and for, you know, the state of the market to improve. But then there's a flip side too, right? Not only are these businesses going to have to track, you know, thousands and thousands of locations, each state, how are they going to enforce this? They're going to need to track businesses in thousands and thousands of locations and try to figure out, you know, what their tax burden is. You have to locate them. You have to, you know, audit them. You know, there's a whole huge process in gathering taxes, and that stuff is hard enough to do locally, just on the state level. Obviously, it's easier because it's within a close geographical area, and just kind of the zeitgeist of each state. Like, people want to play by the rules. They want to, you know, do the right thing in their perception. And so they, you know, it's easier for them to pay taxes to state and local governments that they live under, and they can kind of see the results of it. You know, and they take advantage of the goods and services that these levels of government provide. And so it feels more like a good trade for them. But for businesses outside of these states, it's not that sort of deal for them. They don't get any, you know, I would say it's ill-gotten, you know, returns and advantages from tax money given to the state and goods and services provided. But I don't get any of that. So I feel like it's a pretty untenable thing in both directions. Okay, so I'm going to give a few examples of why I think the idea that states can reach outside of their borders to tax a business is pretty absurd and violates all sorts of, you know, rights and common sense ideas. So if we start really low technology wise, if we start from the bottom, and let's just say someone travels from one state to another to buy goods and services, is it right for the government for their home state government to reach out to businesses in a different state to tax them for those goods that they sold? Well, no, obviously not. It's it's a pretty insane idea, and as far as the legitimacy of it and even the logistics of it, doing something like that would be incredibly difficult. Okay, what if, so before the internet, the way that you could order goods and services remotely was through a catalog. You'd get a catalog, you'd, pull. Actually, I've never done this before, so I can't describe it in complete detail, but you'd order items from a catalog, you send off a check with a list of the things you want, they'd mail it to you. Is it right and proper for the government to reach out to these businesses and demand a tribute from them? No, obviously not. Now, what's the difference between someone traveling to a different state or ordering goods and services through a catalog and navigating through the internet to a website to order goods and services? I would say functionally it's no different. The person still has state citizenship in one place. The business is located in another state, and it operates there, and it pays its taxes, to their whatever levels of government they have there. And there's an exchange in money and goods. Well, hell, it might even get a little more complicated because there's the web server, the physical server that hosts that website is probably in a different state. Does that need to be calculated for too as well? And so there's no real difference for those things, and I think we'd all agree that the examples that I gave are not legitimate reasons for the state to be able to tax outside of its jurisdictions. And the only difference that I've read or claim that I've read that makes these ordering things off the internet different or more substantial is that it happens a lot more often. And that's it. I mean, we can't, can we really measure the ethicalness or the constitutionality of an issue by how often it happens? Is that something that we can really hang a principle on? Oh, if it doesn't happen that much, it's okay, it's fine, we don't need to really worry about it. But if it happens a lot, well, okay, now that's different. I don't think that holds water, and it's just going to be trouble for everybody. The businesses are going to be put in a pretty big bind, and the states are going to be put in a pretty big bind trying to hold all these other businesses in different states and places accountable for the taxes that they put on them. Okay, and so one more thing. So for all the perceived negative results for the government being able to steal less from its citizens, and brick and mortar stores not having as many customers, there's also the side of it where everybody else, literally everyone else in the state or throughout the entire nation, gets to buy more goods and services with their money. They get to increase their quality of life and their wealth more so because of the cheaper goods and services. Trying to imagine that punishing one group of people just to help some other people, like, as a just thing to do is pretty insane, especially when the government's job is the perceived job of the government is to manage the state well and to encourage or at least create the conditions for the people to better their lives. I can't see that is in line with that goal to reduce the purchasing power of the people in that state, just to help out the state itself and some business owners. It kind of reminds me of the looming trade war that Trump is engaging in. Or even just the tariffs and taxation across government borders that politicians like to engage in. They like to imagine that if one place is producing steel or umbrellas more cheaply, that's hurting producers of those things in the United States. When sure, on one side of the coin, if producers in the United States are producing steel and umbrellas at a higher cost, and people are choosing to purchase them at a lower cost from another place, the flip side of that is that people are getting, steel and umbrellas for cheaper and increasing their wealth that way. It's not a zero-sum game. If there are things that are being produced in the country that not as well as in other places, well, then let those things move to all the manpower and money and time in those industries. Let those disperse into other places that are producing things at a better cost and a better efficiency. And so, like the same thing with this online taxation. Just let people purchase goods and services freely. Let them make the best decisions for themselves to raise their quality of life and their wealth. And, let that be. And if business owners are having such a hard time, well, then get off their backs. Stop taxing them so much. If you just wouldn't stop stealing from brick and mortar stores in your location, well, then maybe people would buy from them too, because their prices would drop. Okay, this has gone on long enough. Thanks for listening.